Shut up and sit down.
Howdy guys, this is Andy from Big Mex Workshop and Painting Studio, and today we're painting the Age of Sigmar Gloomspite Gitz Goblin Chieftain himself. This is the Loon King, something along the lines of Shaggoth. I do forget his actual name, and it is a great model, a really nice fig, joy to paint. So we're starting his flesh with Mern Green. Now this is a nice rich green, really good for green skin base flesh tones, but we're going to be bringing up a hell of a lot using different colours to what you would normally use for highlighting green skin flesh. So now I'm adding Scale 75's Undead Flesh in there. Now this is a very pasty green. There's a little bit of blue in there as well, just a little bit more blue than normal, so you get a really interesting finish. And we're starting to pick out the highlights, the cheekbones, the end of his nose, the ridges of his hands, that sort of thing, just to get that really standout highlight look. So once we've added some undead flesh, I'm going to add some more undead flesh in there, just to bring out those highlights a little bit more. And as you can see, it's starting to be end of his nose, and the facial features are really starting to show up on the model, and you're going to get a real good feel for where the highlights need to be. So at this stage we're starting to add some Orcish Dermis into the mixture. Now Orcish Dermis is a bit of a pinky colour. You could probably replace it with Acadian Flesh if you're more of a GW fan. And I'm starting to pick out the extra detail work on his face, his end of his nose, his eyebrows, also across the back of his knuckles and such. Really starting to focus the work on those facial features, really making the model stand out. So having switched to a smaller brush now, I'm using even more Orcish Dermis into the mixture, and really making it a very pinky colour. So once that's gone down, it is a Aphonian Camo Shade and Reetland Flesh Wash, just to add some depth to it, and back onto the Orcish Dermis into the model. Pretty much almost pure Orcish Dermis at this point. I'm just working on the extremities of the facial features across the back of his knuckles. As you can see, he's starting to really look interesting at the back of his skin and across the back of his elbow and that. You get a very cool finish using pinks instead of greens to highlight. So once I've got his face how I want it, I'm adding Tuskor Fur into his gums area, and that's going to be the base for his teeth as well, just to add some differentiation between the lips and the teeth. So now I'm using Scale 75 Birch, which is somewhat similar to Carrick Stone, and just picking out the teeth using that. And now fast forward onto Ivory to pick out the details on the teeth, where I've already started to mark out on the model with the birch. And I'm just really adding the ivory to all the nails and all the teeth as well. I've now added the same wash as before into the areas of his face, across, especially across his teeth, and I'm just picking out the teeth individually with the ivory, so you can actually start seeing the teeth as an individual entity rather than just a block in his face. So, as you noticed, I painted his chin flesh coloured. I realised it was armour at a later date. So I've gone to chainmail as a side from Scale 70 from black metal, and just getting that across all the metalwork what I want to be in that silver sort of colour. Once the chainmail's gone down, Nuln Oil, can't go wrong with Nuln Oil. It's a great colour for any kind of metalwork, so it's good to get a base on there. And a little bit more time on the flesh. It's Resurrection Flesh plus Undead Flesh, just to finish off those highlights and really make them stand out. And I'm just doing the same on the knuckles with the ivory. On the fingernails, just to really make them vibrant and really show off. So it is Antares Red, which could be easily replaced with Corn Red for the eyes. This is a really rich, deep colour, which really does work for green skin eyes. So now it is decayed metal for the first colour of the crown. Now this is something along the lines of warp lock bronze. Great colour from the scale 75 range, but easily replaced with one of the GW ones. And next it is Rune Lord Brass going straight over the top. Obviously keeping the paint thin, and we want to have the darker colours just filtering through a little bit, just to add richness and depth to the crown itself. Once the Rune Lord Brass has gone down, it is a very, very thin coat of Agrex Earthshade across all of the brass work. Just add a little bit of depth to the model, starts to pick out the detail work, so we can start working with the highlights a lot easier. And now it is Skragrott Bronze by Games Workshop. Now this is a lovely colour. It can only be used as a highlight rather than any sort of layer colours, as it's very, very weak pigment, so just be careful with it. It doesn't show through particularly well. So now I've added some chainmail into the Skragrott Bronze. I'm keeping Skragrott Bronze visible in the chainmail, as it just changes the colour to a sort of a yellowy bronzy colour. So I'm adding extra layers of chainmail, extra amount of chainmail on there, just as I'm picking out the details of the model. As you can see, I'm starting to really pull the highlights into the edges of a model, keeping in mind the direction of the sunlight, what we're going for. So after that, again, we are using some steel now, added into the entire mixture, and you're starting to see the highlights really start to pop now. And we're going to just bring that together with a couple of extra highlights and some maybe another wash as well, just to tie the warmness of the bronzy colours together. So I'm using a flesh wash, Rietlin Flesh Shade, obviously really, really thin down, so you can get a couple of layers on, and it just allows you to pick out the detail work and really make the colours come together. Any botched blends, it does assist in covering up a little bit. So after the flesh wash, it is pure chainmail at this stage, and we're just adding the chainmail right onto the edges of the model, and we're going to just start building up those silvers just on the extreme edges, on the leading edges, and on the upper edges of the side of the crown, and any of his brass coloured jewellery we've already painted up as well. So now on the metalwork, it is Steel by Vallejo, and this is going across the highlights of all the metalwork, just to add some extra depth to the model. Really makes the colours really vibrant. So just be very sparing, because it is a goblin, so it wants to be sort of tarnished, but the highlights do need to be striking as well. And then we're finishing off the highlights on the armour work with Chrome by Vallejo. As you know, that's one of my favourites for highlighting metal. And I'm just going around any of the extreme edges what really need to add to as well. So even onto the crown, where the silvers just needs to be a little bit brighter, and just adds that extra bit of detail work to the model. So onto the staff. I'm basing the staff in Rhinox Hide by GW. As you can see, a couple of thin layers. It's a really nice, rich red colour. I do like this, and it works really nicely for woodwork. So I'm going any of the sort of areas where I'm looking for that sort of colour. like his boots and that. It also adds a little bit more warmth to the palette, as it's going to be quite a cool model. So now the Rhinox hide's drying. I've added some brown leather to it, and this is going to start to add detail work to the model. It's very, very subtle transition. I've wanted gentle transitions on this to keep the detail really nice, but also allows me to build up the layers as well, so you get very cool transitions. So a little bit more brown leather has been added to the mixture, and we are being mindful just to work on the highlighted areas, making the kit really stand out. And you're getting there's a lot of detail work on the staff itself. It really does have a lot of interesting features to it. So now it is pretty much pure brown leather at this point, and we're just adding a little bit more of it up and around the highlighted areas, and we're just starting to tarnish up some of the more recessed areas. I'm making a point to keep the area of the model of the staff around his hand quite dark, because that's going to be tarnished by sweat and things. So now I'm adding some orange leather onto the mixture, and this is a very, very vibrant colour, so you got to be careful with it, otherwise it'll look really weird on the model. So it's just a case of being very spare and keep the paint rather thin. So again, I'm adding a little bit more of the orange leather to the mixture. I'm just gently adding more and more towards the highlight areas and the upper reaches of the weird twists and branch-like extremities of the model. So now I'm adding some sandalwood to the mixture, and we're starting to get additional sort of a creamy colour now, and we're starting to build up that colour around the more actively used areas, so around the bottom and around the top where use would be, and it's going to start making it look a lot more worn. So around his hand area though, we added some black leather, which is a nice dark colour, and we're going to make it look like it's been worn with being overused with sweat, so it's a lot more tainted of an area. So it's going to be slightly darker and look a lot more. It'll make the entire model look a lot more interesting because of it. So adding more sandalwood by scale 75 into the mixture, and we're starting to pick out those highlights ever so gently now. We're really starting to do what we can to blend those colours together. So wherever we make mistakes, just a little bit of water and just pull the paint around, so you can move it around as you like, and you get a very cool sort of dusty even brown. Makes the model look a lot more interesting. So now it is adding birch to the model, and this is a very, very light colour, but I'm adding it to around the knots of the wood. Apologies about the camera, it should come into position a little bit. Adding around the knots in the wood where the model it looks like it's got flaws in the staff itself. Now we're going to start adding more of that birch around the twists of the model as well. So we're just starting to make that look like it's being deliberately shaped, and starting to add the additional highlights to it. And this allows the model just to be a bit more colourful, and you can start seeing where the detail of the model is. As I said, it's a great model, and it'd be a shame to not really go to town on the excess detail that he's got. So again, another layer with the birch, and we're just throwing more and more detail around the extreme edges. And we're also adding a bit of the same detail work to, with the same colour right around the bottom of the staff as well. And this makes the staff look like it's been slammed into the ground as he casting spells. Makes the floor look, makes the pole look a lot more tarnished and a lot more well used. So now I'm starting to paint the. So now I'm going to start painting mushrooms now. So I base the stems of the mushrooms with sandalwood, and I'm going onto the top part of the mushrooms with corn red. I'm going to go around a lot of the stuff what I thought was armor plating on the on the crown with the same colour, as I want the mushroom to really stand out and be really colourful. And the moon is based in orange leather. Now it's going to take a little while to get this paint covered up as it's going over a black, and painting black with anything other than dark colours can be quite time consuming, so it's a whole bunch of layers to get that colour up. So once the orange leathers start to become a solid pattern, we're adding plague brown to it. And plague brown's actually quite yellowy, and we're just adding that colour to it to start adding highlights and make the colour actually very yellow. And we're going to go for a really interesting, colourful yellowy moon, which is typical of night goblins, really. After the plague brown, we're adding a bit more plague brown and then some golden yellow into it. So the plague brown, we're going on with just pure plague brown at this point. And we're just starting to pick out the edges, the flaws in the moon, as it looks like it's been carved onto the top of the staff. So we're just starting to focus on that, and we're doing a very sort of feathered sort of style of paintwork at the minute. I'm just building up that yellowy colour. Once the plague brown's dried, we're now starting on the golden yellow, and this is a really vibrant colour, but it just takes a little bit of work to get up. So once you've got the plague brown and the orange leather down, you can start to work on it, and you start to get a very vibrant colour. But it just takes a little while, so bring out those layers really, really thin, because you don't want to cake in the detail work. And obviously you want to be leaving certain areas darker than others as well, as they are going to be in shadow, so you don't want to bring them up quite as bright. So now I'm bringing up some more with the orange, golden yellow. That's pretty much pure golden yellow at this stage. And I'm just building them colours up. As you can see around the back of it, I've not brought it up as bright, and also some certain areas towards the centre as well, just to make it look like the light's hitting it, and just making that really a vibrant yellow, and really bringing it together to make a really nice, colourful section. Again, I'm just following the lines in the moon at this stage, and really just trying to keep the paint as best I can away from the recesses. There's a lot of built-in texture onto this, so I'm really trying to avoid filling any of the texture. I'm also doing the same on some of the mushrooms as well. I wanted the mushrooms to be a couple of colours. It just adds a little bit more variety to the model. So now I've used a wash of orange leather by Scale 75. So I've really thinned it down with some thinners, and I'm just applying it liberally just to add a bit more depth to the model, and we're getting a very nice wash out of this. Now you could use sepia, that would probably work just as well. So now I've added pale yellow to the mixture of with the golden yellow in. As you can see, it's a very, very vibrant colour. A really, really pale, really quite a bright yellow. So it makes for a great highlight onto the golden yellow. I'm just starting to pick out all those areas where I'm wanting it to really start to pop. So now I'm going to add a little bit of Reekland Flesh Shade, and again it's now pretty much pale yellow at this stage. The Reekland Flesh Shade went on just to pick out the detail, again really thin. The pale yellow is coming on just as a top highlight now, and I'm just bringing those flaws in the moon really up to a high bright colour. So I've added some dead flesh into the pale yellow. Dead flesh is a very creamy colour. It really worked well for highlighting yellows. So first time I tried it actually, just sort of sprung to me. And as you can see, I'm just starting to pull those highlights around, making the moon look like it's starting to reflect the light as well. And extra dead flesh right up onto the top extra layers, and what you're getting is these really pale colours now right at the extremities of the moon, both front and back, also a little bit on the mushrooms as well, and you're getting a nice edge, a hard edge with the with this real bright vibrant yellow. So back onto the mushrooms again, and the mushrooms, the next layer is a blood red by scale 75, not dissimilar to Mephiston red, to be fair. It's just a nice vibrant red, real colourful, and I'm just picking out those mushrooms, really making them start to stand out against the darker colours of its staff. So next layer is a little bit of orange leather onto the hilt of his dagger, just to add some colour. You can't really see it very much, so you don't need to go over the top on the dagger, as it's going to be covered up largely by his cloak. So the next layer on the mushrooms is Antares red. We're starting to get up to the very bright colours of red now, and as you can see, we're going to really start to stand out, especially against the crown, which came as a bit of a shock to me when I looked at the box art. I didn't, not realising that they were in fact mushrooms, not growing out of the top of his head, not weird points on his crown. And now it is Aldebaran red, which is something like Wazdaka, or maybe even one of the slightly brighter colours. I'm just picking out the lightest areas of the mushrooms, making the just adding additional highlights just to really set them off. So again, back to the Orcish dermis, and we're using that as a final highlight on the mushrooms, as because it's a pink, it really goes nicely over the reds as well. So I've added dead flesh onto the bases of the stems of the mushrooms. That's going into the sandalwood, and just allowing it to stand out a little bit. So it's a different colour to the staff, albeit only subtly. So I'm just going around picking out all those mushrooms. So I've added a little bit of birch to the dead flesh, to just a vibrant, which is a vibrant creamy colour, somewhere in the region of Shabty Bone, maybe Screaming Skull. And I've used that as a highlight on all the on the mushrooms, and I'm also doing it across the spots of the mushrooms as well, using that same colour, just to make the mushrooms a bit more interesting. And then it's an Agrax Earthshade, really thinned down across the entirety of all the mushroom areas, blending the colours between the staff and the moon as well, just adding that extra transition together. Really makes the model seem like it fits together properly. So now I'm onto the cloak. So you've seen me paint Abaddon. I use greys as highlights on the Abaddon model. So I decided to do something a little bit different and wanted a cool black colour. So I started off using blues. So this is scale 75 deep blue. Now you could use Cantor blue. It's not quite as rich as this colour, but if you thin it down enough, you'll get a nice subtle highlight what comes over the black ever so gently. It just takes a bunch of layers just to so only the areas you want highlighted up. So once that's gone down, and I've got a couple of layers of that, it's navy blue now. Again, this is scale 75, but I'm sure the navy blue is available in pretty much any range. And I'm doing exactly the same technique as what I did with the deep blue. I'm just bringing really thin layers of the paint onto the highlighted areas, and you're going to slowly see the blue just start to stand out a little bit. So it was looking a little bit too blue. Mix it up a bit. So I'm just adding some Nuln Oil just to darken it down. A couple of layers of that, and you're going to get the blackness what it needs to be, alongside with blue highlights. So as long as you use it really thin, you can be quite liberal with it. Just get it on there. So you might need to build it up a couple of times to do that. So now I'm using GW's Dark Reaper. Again, this is incredibly thin paint. I'm just adding highlights now, just literally painting them in with this really thin paint to the brightest areas of the cloaks and his hat. And you're going to start seeing the highlights really start to stand out now as you build up that Dark Reaper layer. So the next layer is a little bit of work on the robes, on the ropes and that, which is plague brown as a base. I'm just making them look like they're going to come up in a nice blonde colour. Onto the cloak again, and it is Thunderhawk Blue by GW. Now it's quite a bright colour, this Thunderhawk Blue, but when used thin enough, obviously you've got a lot of control on it, and it just really works over the blue-black colour. So once you're getting them over the folds in the cloaks, the cloak itself starts to really pop, but it's not overpowering because it's a cool colour amongst the sides of all these nice warm browns and bronzes. So once that's in, I'm going to add another Nuln Oil wash just to darken it down again. And it also ties the colours in together. Now I'm going to back up a bit. So now I'm going to add yet some more Thunderhawk Blue onto the model, and this is going to really start to make those highlights show up vibrantly. Even on the camera now, you can start to see the highlights of the cloak and the folds in the cloak. I'm keeping the highlights as thin as possible now, as I don't want to take too much away from the rest of the model. As you can see, these highlights will really start to look ever so bright and vibrant. And because of that, we don't want them looking too overpowering. Nuln Oil across the entirety of the cloak again, just to really darken it all down and bring that colour together. Again, always thin down. I never put non-oil on that sort of stuff pure. So onto the skull. Now it is Karak stone as the base colour for all of the bonework on that wand. And as you can see, it's just getting a couple of good layers on there. So I'm just quickly popping over onto the... He's got a potion bottle. And I brought Thunderhawk Blue out again for that, because I thought it was a nice colour. And I wanted to actually use it for something as well as just a highlight. And it also ties it into with the rest of the model as well. So whilst I was waiting for that to dry, I went over the skull, all the bonework with Agrax Earthshade. As always, thin down with some airbrush thinner. You can use water for this. I just prefer to use actual thinners, as I find it works better for me that way. But use whatever is what you find comfortable. So I'm now using some a mixture of Karak stone and bone white by Vallejo. Bone white could be easily replaced with Screaming Skull. I'm just picking out the detail work because there's a lot of separation. It's like a spinal cord or something what's wrapping around the wand, so you've got a lot of detail to play with on that. So the next layer is just pure bone white at this stage. This is again, could be Screaming Skull. That is totally usable instead of bone white. Or any of these sort of light bone colours can be used, and I'm just picking out the detail now, making the most of all the extra detail work what the designers put in, bringing that skull to a real high point. After which, I've added my old favourite ivory into the bone white. I'm just starting to finish up, bring them those little sections together with these final highlights. Because, well, sometimes it's really nice just to go a couple of layers extra. It's generally worth doing. And then it is pure ivory at this stage, just for the final tips around the most exposed areas of the bones, and just to really set them off a nice finish. Yes, and now I'm painting the decoration, his pouch, which again using the same colour as I used for the ropes and things, which is a plague brown, which is going to get agraxed. So onto the moon itself, and that is orange leather again. I chose orange leather because it's a great colour to get a nice base over black, although it does still take a couple of layers. The pigment is strong enough to so it doesn't take 100. You can literally go straight over the black with the orange leather instead of having to white it out or anything. So a couple of layers in, and it is the same colours as what we started the moon with. Is orange leather and plague brown. Entire section out. The moon on the back starts at section 3180. Get rid. So back onto the little water bottle thing he's got, and I've added some bone white to the Thunderhawk Blue, and it's just going to add some nice vibrant highlights, make it look like the light shining through it. Really nice little feature having something like that on, and you can build it up to gently with the bone white, so it really does start to shape the light away. just be careful to make sure that you have a highlight coming out of the bottom. So onto the squigs. The squigs are started off with corn red. And using a nice vibrant red, but I'm using a different one because I wanted the squigs to be their own thing in a sense. So once I've got a decent coat of a blood red, corn red, I've added some blood red to it, and I'm starting to add highlights to the squigs, and really start to pick out the interesting details of these little guys. As you can see, there's loads of detail on these fellas, so you've got a lot to work with. Really is worth having a little bit of fun with these guys, as they're so full of character. So at this point it is pure blood red now, which is probably the same as I said, one of the brighter GW paints. I'm just starting to pick out the detail around the back of his, around his spine and around his knees and top of his nose. So once the blood red's gone down, it's now Antari's red, and we're just starting to pick out those highlights ever so much, that bit more, really starting to bring the detail out. You can start to see how the highlights are hitting the end of his nose and across the knees. Just with a few layers, you're building it up nicely. So the next layer is the Antari's red with Mars orange, which you can use quite easily, Fire Dragon Bright or Troll Slayer, any of the bright oranges. Just so long as it's not pure, it's mixed in with the red, and just start to finish off those highlights. You really start to make the top of the brows and that really vibrant and really colourful. So there you are. That's the Loon King all finally painted up, and yeah, it was an absolute riot to paint. Loads of detail, loads of interesting little features on the little guy. I really hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed painting it, and I hope you learned something from doing it. As always, we've got some thank yous to give out. So thank you for you guys for watching this. Obviously, thank you to our Patreons. Our top paying Patreons are the Orc Boys, Love Minis, Ludwig Hofbauer, Warren, D-Wack, Kit Lindquist, the Acmus of Dawn, and Mark. You're our top Patreons. Thank you for your stuff, because without you guys we wouldn't be able to do this at all. And obviously also thank you to the Outpost, which is in our affiliate link, where you can get reduced price models at a reasonable rate as well. So please check them out. They're in the link below. If you have any questions, hit us up with the questions. We've got no problem. We will try and get in touch with everybody who asks us anything. We do try and answer every message you give us. So thank you for watching, guys, and we shall see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.